Okay, welcome everyone. As you know, my name is Aaron, and today I've got the absolute pleasure of having Richard with us. Richard, so that I don't misspeak your surname or just represent you wrong, I do know that you're from Testmate, but can you just give us a little bit of introduction of who you are and what Testmate does?
Yeah, sure. So Testmate, we would be sort of one of the leading UX research agency in Australia. So essentially we do qualitative user testing. It's kind of like common sense testing. You're getting users in front of a website or a user experience to understand where they're getting stuck or frustrated for the purpose of improving conversion rates and ultimately getting a better result either through your marketing that the users on the website. We do it for the likes of Telstra, Westpac, Mitsubishi, Woolies, Services Australia, those sort of companies. And very interested in how we can create better user experiences.
What we're going to be looking at today, and obviously because, I know you would agree as well, the biggest thing that I really want to communicate to people when it comes to the whole Google Ads process is it's not just what is happening inside of Google Ads. You can have a common message I have to people is that you can have the absolute best Google Ads structure, highly optimized, the best ad copy. But if you're sending it to a poor performing landing page, you're just wasting money. So that's why I wanted to have you on. And we're going to obviously really be talking about the user testing process coming through the prism, looking at it from paid ads. Obviously, we'll be mentioning Google ads, but this means the same, and the same principles would hold true for any type of paid advertising. So whether it be on Meta as well. I think a great place to start would be, you did mention it before in the introduction, but if you could just talk us through what actually user testing is and the process that you undertake.
So user testing, really, we often sort of say call it qualitative user testing, but essentially it's just common sense testing. It really isn't rocket science. Like what you're fundamentally doing is you're trying to get a group of people that are in your target market. So you're looking for people that may be in the market to buy your product or service, and you're trying to get inside their mind. So you're getting these group of people to go through your website, through your experience, and you're trying to get them to follow the normal flows. So if you've got an e-com site, you're getting them to go there, find the product that they want, go through the checkout process, start to finish, and you're trying to understand what are the barriers for them. How do they understand your site, and are they understanding it the way you're wanting them to understand it? And then are they getting stuck anywhere? Are they getting frustrated? You're trying to understand the impediments to conversion, and then how can you improve it? And you're doing it all in the context of speak to your customers. The best way to improve your conversion rate is not what you think or what I think. It's let's get the target market in front of it. And it's a very, very efficient process. You don't need to test a lot of people to really get some very strong data on what you need to be looking at. That's why in many ways I just encourage, even if you don't have budgets to be doing a lot of user testing, just to grab one or two people that are looking over it. But essentially the process, because you're sort of asking, well, what's the process you go through? It's pretty simple. So first of all, you're understanding, what are you trying to learn? So, you might have a problem that you're trying to solve. Conversion rates, we've got a high bounce rate on this page, or something's not working. So then you're trying to then come up with a flow, a test plan that's going to test out that journey, that's going to really bring that more to light. And then essentially you're just setting a series of tasks to get the user to go through, to go and test it. So you'd create a test plan. So normally that would be something to the tune of, first of all, you may want to get them to go to a landing page and they're explaining what are their first observations, what do they think this is about. You're trying to get a perception of how they're understanding the value proposition, those sort of things. And then you might be asking them what they're inclined to do next, because you're trying to understand the strength of your call to actions or the visual hierarchy on your site in terms of what it's leading them to. And then you'll set some tasks, just common tasks. Go and research and find a product, go through their purchase journey. So essentially you'll have this sort of test plan. You'll then need to go and recruit your testers. So you go through, you find the test. This is probably the most important part, is getting the right testers. And you just want to make sure that you're as much as you can. But look, any testing is better than no testing, because you're going to learn something, but as much as you can, try to get those users that are actually relevant to your target market. So essentially, we've got a big database of maybe 10,000 testers around Australia, but we just got to filter it out based on that. But even still, if you're doing it yourself, you're just trying to find people that you're confident, yep, these are a good representation of the people that might be buying our product.
So you're saying, especially for smaller brands or businesses where they may not have the budget for their own user testing, because I know, like for me, an example I think of is when I do my own Google Ads courses and those things. So when I was creating that together, I actually went and found, I think it was 8 different friends, and it wasn't a high number that were
Yeah,
business owners
yeah,
that didn't really understand Google Ads. And I took them through the course before I launched it public and
yeah,
basically went through the process. Does this make sense? What am I missing? And the feedback I got from that, I was able to make some real great
yeah,
little tweaks to the course structure. So essentially, that's the same process that you're doing. Is you're just basically getting
exactly.
people to come through, see on the page, does this make sense? Does it flow? Is it too wordy? Is it too boring? Are the messages not getting there?
Yeah, and like definitely there are elements of putting together a really good test plan, but I would say just for the average person out there, don't get too carried away on it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Exactly what you did. You want to get a group of people in your target market to give you some feedback, and you very quickly pick up the most obvious problems, and they're the biggest
Yeah.
impediments to conversion. Exactly as you said, you're getting those people to look at, they're giving you feedback, and then you're iterating on that. And the other thing I would say is one of the most powerful things is just the iteration. So, you'll
Yeah.
do the testing, you'll make some changes, you do it again, and you make
Yeah.
changes. You do. What we've found is if you're doing 3 rounds, you will have a bulletproof solution. It's very hard to have major usability problems after 3 rounds. So, you pick up most of the stuff in the first, you make your improvements in the second. By the third, it's usually always very bulletproof.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the one thing I think you would agree as well, is that when websites first came out, it was kind of like, oh, we've done that. We never need to look at it again. But a website is always, especially when you're first launching a website or first launching a new product, you're doing those initial rounds of testing, collecting data, making changes, collecting data again until you get those stats that you need. All right. Hey there, Aaron Young here. Thank you for watching this interview. And because you are still watching this interview, it's letting me know that you are really interested in learning everything that you can about Google Ads. Now, I may be biased, but the best place to learn Google Ads is inside of my paid community, which is called 10x Google Ads. And the reason for why this is such an amazing community is because not only every month do I give exclusive masterclass trainings on Google Ads that I don't share on YouTube, plus I also run live group coaching calls every month where I complete community members' Google Ads reviews. Plus, you can ask me any questions that you have about Google Ads. There is also the amazing community feed. And this is a private Google Ads feed where you can upload screenshots and you can ask questions. And not only me and my highly qualified Google Ads team, but also you get support from over 400 individual members. It would be my absolute pleasure to see you in my paid Google Ads community very, very soon. And the best thing is that you get all of this for less than the price of a cup of coffee every day. So why don't you switch out your daily cup of coffee for the best Google Ads training knowledge that you'll get anywhere in the world. And if you want to get an exclusive discount, all you need to do is to follow that link in the description below, and I'll give you a lifetime discount to my 10X community. All right, let's now jump back into this interview. So from all of the tests that you've done, what are some of the biggest mistakes? And let's just maybe go the top 1 or 2 biggest mistakes that you see where people are sending people from a paid ad campaign into a landing page. What are 2 or 3 of the biggest mistakes?
One of the most common things that I would say is just not having a clear value proposition on your landing page. And it's something that almost everyone listening probably thinks that they have a clear value proposition on their landing page. We all do, you build your website and you think it's amazing and you think it's very clear. But the one thing that is so evident through a lot of the user testing is your target market often just doesn't understand it the way you think that they will. And there's sometimes you need to put quite a lot of thinking and take a back step to get that value proposition clear. So what do I mean by that is just when a user comes onto the site, within the first 20 seconds, you want them to have a very good understanding of what your offering is about, like what makes you different, why are you special, but what is it exactly that you're offering? And there's a lot of work that goes into simplifying the message and having visuals that very clearly back up what you're trying to say. So it can be quite nuanced, but this is one of the most powerful things of the user testing is often you think you've got that covered and you've ticked it off, but from the user testing, it'll often be clear that the users are not clear on your value proposition. Typically, conversion rates are much lower. So it's well worth putting in the effort to just being very confident that that's coming across clearly.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that we always talk through, I mean, we look at this too when we look at Google Ads campaigns or any paid campaigns. With things, obviously, we check in Google Ads, but we're going very, very quickly to the landing page. And the big thing that we always see is we try to remind clients all the time is that there's people are driven either by pain or desire. So your proposition has to either help them solve a problem or it has to help them attain something they want to attain.
Yeah.
And they're the two emotional levers that you're looking to pull on. Any other one or two real quick
Yeah,
ones?
I would say another one is just being very careful about how busy the landing page
Yeah.
is. So you just need to be like, often you're just trying to put too much in and it's just overwhelming for the user and they're not clearly able to break it down. And you'll see often the better conversion sites are actually a lot simpler. You often have more spacing, simpler messaging. So it's really part of the art
Yeah,
and the
that's a
skill
good
is
one.
how you can simplify something that's quite complex, but make it easy to scan and absorb, making sure it's a really clean landing page. You often just see, just too much on there and it's overwhelming and people aren't really absorbing the message, even though your message is there, people aren't absorbing it. So that's another one. But then I would say the number one thing that is most important, and I would say, like, if there's only one thing that you take away from this whole podcast or anything, the number one thing is trust. And
Yeah.
we see this over and over again in our user testing. And you need to be thinking, why should my user or my customer trust what I'm saying? Why will they trust what I'm saying? Because that is so much of what's going on subliminally for the user is like, do they trust you or not? And so the thing that's often missing on landing page is clear trust signals that are helping to feed into that confidence of the user. And when I say trust signals, things that I mean is reviews, but independent reviews. So it's like a Google review where it's more independent, or an independent third-party review,
Yeah.
or testimonials that are coming through, or video testimonials. So it's actually clear that it's not just a fake one. Maybe a video from the owner, real photos, not stock photos, accreditations, awards, thought leadership content, brands that you've worked with. They're just all examples of like trust signals, and you're trying to think about, so you've got your message, you've got a clear message, but you're really trying to focus on why should anyone trust what I'm saying? And you need to put in those subliminal messages there so that people are going, oh, yep, trust you. And that's a very important part.
And that's a good point that you put like in and around that, I guess, the power of imagery in there, because, if
Yeah,
you've got a collection of 3 or 4 brands that you've worked with that people can recognize straight away,
yeah.
that takes away a lot of words that you have to say.
Yeah, it's instant credibility. And the user's not even thinking about it, but they just
No.
see it and it means something to them. So those things are very important. It's just thinking
Yeah.
about where you're putting it on the page so that your user's seeing it and that is increasing trust. So that's a big part of what drives conversion.
We will park some of those points because we will come
Yeah.
back to them
Yep.
later. Because one thing I do also want to ask is, what's the relationship between ad copy and ad assets? So whether this is
Yep.
image ads, video ads, text ads, what's the relationship between the ad that the user sees versus the landing page? Are there any clear parallels or anything that you've learned that
Yeah.
someone should really focus on?
Well, it's interesting actually. So I would say it's just an area that's very poorly researched and also focused on is what is the user journey from the ad
Yeah.
to the landing page. And that's something that we do quite a lot of user testing on now, actually, because initially we would just do user testing often just from the website and we're looking at that. But we realized that actually it's very important the expectation that the user has going into the landing page. And so what's very important when you look at your Google Ads and your landing page is the expectation. Because when you set up your Google Ads, you're often doing it just to get maximum click-through rate. Like
Yeah.
you're trying to improve click-through rates through catchy headlines, and getting sort of stats or your value proposition out there. Now, the user has a certain understanding in their mind then of what when they've clicked on it, and it's very important looking at what is the landing page in relation to what they're expecting. So if you have a certain value proposition that you're pushing in your ad, make sure that that same value proposition is clear on the landing page. So there's consistency. And, the same thing for the main call outs that you might be doing. Always check what are the key value proposition and call outs that are happening on my ad. And is that also clear on the landing page as well? So just doing those checks is really important. Something that's we've found is often
Yeah.
completely overlooked.
When we go through and review, a lot of our teaching and training as well is when it comes to sort of ad copy especially, is we really want to set the person up and give them a clear expectation already of what we're wanting them to do when they get into the landing page. So it's kind of like a little
Yeah.
conversion test. And I mean, obviously we need to have high click-through ratios, but once you've got a good standard click-through ratio, we then really start working on one of the better ways to improve efficiency in a paid ads campaign is to get people to sometimes not click on your ad because they're not relevant to who you are. So one of the ways that we do that is that we do that by introducing a price, especially if you're a higher or a more premium service or product. Putting a price indicator there can cut a lot of things out. Or we'll also pre-queue them on what we want them to do. So if we're wanting them to fill out like a quote or do a phone call, we're introducing that in the ad copy. And then as soon as they get on a landing page, we make sure that that's front and center. So you're basically kind of leading them through, and it's kind of like a map directions. No, I definitely agree with what you're saying
Yeah,
there.
and
So
I think you need to be careful too with the tone and specific messaging. So
yeah,
sometimes in Google ad copy, you might be inclined to get quicker call to action, or maybe you're implying something is a quicker process or like a cheaper or faster. And it needs to be consistent then with what is on the actual landing page or their genuine offering as well. So that's, yeah, one thing that I'd really encourage is just doing a
yeah.
reality check.
And it comes back to, I think everyone understands, especially with Google Ads, the importance of keyword relevance to the landing page. We even bring that across to your offer relevance, making sure that what they're seeing in terms of the offer and expectation is also met when they hit on the landing page.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just on that, I mean, I know this is probably going to be very, very different for different businesses and different industries. I mean, just in your experience, are there any, I guess, benchmark conversion rates that businesses should be hitting for both a lead gen business and an e-commerce? So let's start with lead gen. What would you?
That's a really good question. So I'll give you some broad numbers and then I'll
Yeah,
explain what's important. But for a lead gen, in simple terms, you should be expecting to get conversion rates between about 4 and 10%. So that's a conversion to a phone call or a form submission. To be honest, it can vary quite a bit. The thing that ultimately determines conversion rate, like what you need, is the cost per click and the value
yeah,
of your service. So, for example, if you have a very high value of service, the cost per click might be low enough such that a lower conversion rate is totally
yeah,
fine. What we typically find is if the conversion rate is below 4%, we're kind of worried something's wrong there. So we're sort
yeah,
of going, okay, maybe the value proposition is not clear, user experience isn't smooth, something's sort of gone wrong. But usually above 4%, you're probably in a range where you can bid profitably with your Google ads. But that's ultimately, what you're sort of looking at in terms of if the conversion rates are too low.
okay. And then switching
Um,
over for e-commerce.
E-com, we typically find it's between 1.5 to sort of 4%. But there's a big variance. I've seen e-com sites
Yeah,
that are converting at like 12, 15%.
yeah, and then it also comes to the type of
Um,
advertising they're doing. Like,
yeah,
are they really going just targeting bottom of the funnel, high intent, high converting,
yeah.
or are they in a sense of they're trying to grow their market, so they're doing a lot of top level spending?
Yeah, so it ranges a lot. As a broad brushstroke, I'd say you probably struggle if you're converting it below 1.5%. You're
Yeah,
probably going to find it hard to be commercial on Google Ads and your paid channel. So it's kind of in that order. But ultimately, it is what it is based on the competition in the market because the competition's driving the cost per click. So they're prepared to pay that because they are converting at a rate that's commercial for them, right?
yeah,
So it's kind of the market is helping to dictate to you where you should be. So it's sort of like, if you look at the cost per click that a well optimized campaign will be, then you can sort of work out the benchmark conversions that you kind of need to be at to be getting the kind of ROAS that's going to stack up. And typically, those should be achievable because it's
yeah,
achievable for someone else, evidenced by the fact that they're happy to pay that amount. So it's a good way for you to go, hang on, the numbers dictate that I should be converting at 3% here based on what other people are paying, but I'm only converting at 1%.
yeah,
Okay, what might be going wrong? Like that's kind of the way I would be thinking about conversion rate because unfortunately it just varies so much from different industries and as you said e-com to lead
yeah.
gen. I can give you some good broad numbers, but for specific businesses, I would encourage you to look at your numbers and go, okay, what is my cost per click, therefore, and what is the average value of purchase, and to lead base, what percentage of leads do I convert?
Yeah,
So,
and you're right because whenever if we were to review a Google Ads account, we would basically, when it comes to the conversion rate, if it's an e-commerce site or e-commerce brand, and we're seeing that conversion rate under 3%, we're straight away doing a bit of a dive and looking at, what is their issue here? Are there other factors in terms of which make it make sense? And a lot of times we find that there are things that they need to improve. Same for a lead gen. For us, we generally use 5 as the benchmark. We go, right, there's something
Yep.
inherently wrong here. But I think you could bring some good points there is that they're different for every industry, different for every business.
Yeah.
And the numbers may still stack up for your business. They're lower than that, but it's always looking at, okay, if we're below those marks, let's have a look and just make sure that we're okay with it as a business.
Yeah, no, 100%. It does. It does. I've seen businesses that convert at 1.5% run very profitably, but
Yeah.
it depends on the industry. So you got to do your own numbers on it, but there's some good broad numbers.
Yeah. Richard, one of the main reasons why I wanted you on this episode is because, and I can't even remember 100% where I saw, but I saw that you brought out these things it was 5 core principles for landing pages. So I wanted to spend some time talking about those. Are you able to also just to give us some background on, like, as Testmate as a whole, how many user tests have you done, just approximately?
Well, we've probably done 10,000 user tests, I would say.
Yeah,
like in the order, it would be many thousand.
Yeah.
So what we did for this research paper was we went, okay, let's look at as much as we can across the board of the different user testing that we've done. What are some of the consistent principles that are leading to the best designs, the best conversion rates, the best user experience? I mean, ultimately, there is a strong correlation between user experience and conversion rate. It's all qualitative user testing.
Yeah.
So what we're really putting together here is a guide on how to, use these principles to get the best possible user experience. But ultimately, that should lead to the highest conversion rate.
And as we talk through those, just so everyone knows as well, what I will do is in the show notes and in the description, I'll be putting a link to how you can get in contact with Richard, and also we'll also put a link into where they can access this data. So yeah, let's run with those top 5 core principles for landing pages.
Yeah, all of these probably feel quite intuitive to all of you, because typically what you think is going to work well is usually what does work well. But it's important to really go into detail and make sure you're doing them well. So the first thing I would say that's really important is just a beautiful design. So people like beautiful aesthetics. They like things that look nice. And it kind of ties back into what I was saying before with like a cluttered landing page, a busy landing page. This beautiful design, I find, can be a tricky one to get across because it can feel quite subjective. It's like, what is a beautiful design? Obviously you want to have a beautiful design, but okay, how do I actually get a beautiful design? And I would say within that, there's a few core things to start looking at, consistent things that typically when you look at a sign, you go, oh, that's a really nice design. So one is just cleanliness, like as in like there's a lot of space. You need to look at your spacing between things. So also things should fit neatly on a fold. So you look often, people look at it on their screen, either on the mobile or the desktop, and there's a fold. And you need to be thinking what fits neatly on a fold on a page, and then the next fold. And as people are scrolling down, then but even text is really important. Often it might just be like 3 lines of text, but not across the whole page. Often text across the whole page is too difficult to read. So it's actually often like half the width or different components depending on how big the section is, or different size depending on the section. But things need to be easy to scan.
Yeah.
So it's like you want to have them sort of neat, easy to scan. Also things like the design of buttons and not having like shadings. Anyway, it's tricky to explain, but there's the heading fonts and things like that contribute to the kind of like a modern feel. But the best I can kind of sort of explain in simple terms is lots of spacing, clear visuals, and not using stock photography as much as you can. Or if you are using stock, just try to be really careful to make sure it's believable. You want it to make sure that people aren't obviously looking at it going, oh, that's clearly a stock photo. So, having nice, really clear visuals and clear call to actions as well. So in the fold, there's typically just one clear call to action. So again, it's probably something that you intuitively would know or you'd be thinking anyway, but often just going through and checking those things is really important.
And even I'd say too, just a simple one too, just making sure if you've got a dark background of a website, you have really bright text, and vice versa. Making sure you've got that contrast so it's easy to read. All right. Easy, clean design is number 1. What's number 2?
Number 2, and it's more important than the first one, is actually intuitive design. So what I mean by that is people need to be able to find what they're looking for easily on your website. So things need to be where they're expecting. So there's a couple of things to say to this is, first thing is be very careful about doing things away from standard web conventions. So what I mean by that is like, a website, we typically have the navigation at the top. Typically, the logo goes back to the homepage. All sorts of things, like the heading font is going to be larger than the body. You'll have sort of standard things that, you'll have your hamburger menu on a mobile design. But like there are certain web conventions, and you want to be careful about being too crazy creative with your design, because your opportunity cost is that the users don't easily understand where to go and where to look. And that's a
Yeah.
big cost, actually. So it's not to say don't do it, but just you need to carefully consider that. So sticking to user conventions is very important. And then also just like we'll call the information architecture. So how are you grouping that information together? So, people will go under like your products tab.
Yeah.
How are you organizing all the products together in a way that's easy to find? And or like then your search as well. Like do you have a good search that's actually easy to find your products? So really when we say intuitive design, we're trying to reduce the number of error clicks or confusion from the user. And this is where the testing becomes really important, because you'll naturally think you've got it right. Like you'll kind of build your design and for you, it'll be intuitive. But that's where you really want to test it. So you're trying to test a variety of different tasks on your site, and you just want to know if things are in the intuitive areas for the user. The lower the error clicks, the easier it is to find information, better the user experience, and the more likely they are.
And I think people will be surprised how easy it is to get this wrong. I was watching a video, and it was actually someone doing a review of the YouTuber Airax site. He's got like I think it was like a pizza sauce that he was selling, and a buy now button went back to his homepage, and he didn't know. And it's like a really, really simple thing. So, and it's estimated like the amount of money he potentially could have lost just because that wasn't tested, and it wasn't like simple little mistakes like that can make a big difference.
Yeah,
So,
and I would say it's very hard to get it right without testing, because you'll
yeah,
inherently think you've got it right, but you really want to get that feedback from your customers that, they actually can easily find the product or service that they're looking for and get the information that they're looking for. What
yeah,
are the key bits of information that are important in the purchase decision? Like, what are they actually trying to find, and what's the hierarchy of that? And then have you laid it out on your page so that the hierarchy is similar to what they're looking for? Because often there's a lot of peripheral content as well, which is
yeah.
important, but you want to have that down further on the page so that it's not confusing the user when they're first going through it.
So, Richard, would it be fair to say on these first 2 points of nice design, clean design, and intuitive design, it's really about removing friction. So we've worked so hard to get them on the website. We now don't want to scare them away by a poorly designed website, but we also don't want to confuse them by a website that doesn't make sense. Is that what we're saying there?
100%. Like when the user's confused, they're very hard to convert them. And the point that I make is like you'll confuse them more than you think.
Yeah.
And it's actually very hard to really simplify it. And that's where you need to start speaking to some of your customers just to better understand what parts aren't clear to them. Because you'll look at it and you'll be like, but it's there.
Yeah.
Why can't you say, I said that. I was just on that line there, but you didn't see it. And then they say, oh, okay, well, actually, that's a very important point. How do we make that clearer? And that's where we talk about, having a clean design, because then you really highlight what is important. The temptation is you just want to put so much on there, but actually there's a hierarchy of what's important. And if you have a very clean design with less things there, you can make it more obvious what you want to make obvious. And that's part of the process. You speak to your customers, you're trying to find out what's important to them. You want to make those things obvious.
All right, great. Now let's move on to number 3.
Number 3. So this one is speed. So the faster your site is, the higher the conversion rate. Now there's a couple of interesting points on this. So you've got raw speed, right? So raw speed is essentially how quickly your website loads. And actually, there's a lot of research that suggests that for every second that you improve the speed, it's about a 10% improvement in conversion rate. Now, I've typically found from our testing that only holds true down to about a 3-second load time. Below that, the user's not really frustrated. It's not improving it that much. But particularly if you're over 5 seconds, there is going to be some frustration that starts to creep in, and that's actually quite a material part too in where some gains could be in conversion, amongst other things too, like it plays into SEO as well. But the other thing I would say from our testing is more important than raw speed is actually the perceived speed. So it's not actually what the real loading speed is. It's how fast the user finds it. And the reason why it's an important distinction, and we learned this through a range of our testing, but the first time we learned it actually was on the banking apps. CBA, for example, didn't have the fastest app when we tested it. I think it might have been, say, Westpac or something, had like
Yeah.
ANZ might have had a faster app. But their app had really good loading signs and symbols, and the users didn't really notice that they were waiting longer, and they didn't get frustrated. And so
Okay.
they actually perceived it to be a faster experience because they had good loadings and intuitive design. So interestingly, when people can find what they're looking for through good information architecture, through good intuitive design, even if the raw speed is slower, they perceive it to be faster. So again, it talks to why intuitive design is so important, because it
Yeah.
really plays into the perceived speed as well. And we found that perceived speed was more important than the actual speed.
Yeah.
So, but speed does play a role.
And the core message would be there as well is obviously it's, once you're getting below that 3 seconds, any improvement is going to be marginal, but taking a site from 5 seconds to 3 seconds, you're going to see a real increase in conversion rates.
Yeah, exactly. Over 5, you've got a problem that you want to solve.
Yeah.
And then over 3, look, don't get me wrong, I'd love, any site you want to get down to maybe 2.5 or 2 or as low as you can, but exactly as you said, it's marginal gains. You end up spending a lot more money on what isn't really going to have a major impact on conversion.
All right, so let's move to number 4. What's the fourth?
We already talked about this. So this is around value proposition. So it's just so important that your users have a clear understanding what you're offering. And so, how do you use, there's a couple of key things, but how are you using your imagery that supports what you're offering? And does your imagery support your message? And then do you have just a clear message that's explaining, what you do, but what makes you different? Why should people buy from you? And again, I would just say, don't assume that you've got it right. It's a very difficult thing to get right. Even through iterative testing, like often people still get confused about, why they should go there, or what's different, or even sometimes what you're even really offering when it's a nuanced thing. So that's an area that it's just worth testing and trying to refine.
If we could just probably with this value proposition, because obviously for e-commerce brands, the value proposition is probably a little bit not easier, but in terms of because it's a physical product, like the tech specs and those type of things can help a bit. When it gets over to like service-based industries, digital products, anything like that, do you have any examples of things that work? Like in terms of, because some of these things you need to explain why your service is 50% higher than other people's services. Is there anything that you sort of found works in that?
What I would say is testing is what really works. So you'll have a good sense of your own business and what things you're trying to get across. The question is, are you actually getting it across? So you need to test a few different messages on there to see what the users are absorbing with it. Because it's a combination of like, you're trying to get across what do you do. So you want the user to understand what you do, but then also why they should go with you. And so you're trying to get across quite a bit in a small amount of text. So it's often, there's just different phrasing that you want to try. So you might be inclined to put it in quite long because there's quite a lot you're trying to get across. But the longer it is, the less the user is absorbing.
Yeah.
So there's no real one answer here. I would just say, you've got to go in with your best guess, because as the business owner, you probably have the best guess of what it is. But then you've just got to see, okay, what do my users understand from this? Okay, yep, that's exactly what it is. Or if not, how can I modify this messaging? What part didn't they understand? Let's try a different one, and then keep trying until you get the right version. But it is, even just that simple one, it's like, even if you just take a screenshot of what is above the fold on your page and send it out to some people that they're in your target market, and you go, what does this mean to you? And you'll probably be horrified in a lot of cases what they actually think it is versus what you were hoping them to get. And it often dumbfounds me where I'll look at it like, wow, okay, well, we really didn't get that across at all.
Is that example of, I've got teenage daughters who are going through their exams at the moment and their assignments, writings and that. And it comes back to, they'll be writing an assignment and then you come and read it and you go, have you read this? And it just comes back to, I remember when I was at uni too, if you've looked over something so many times, you can just miss the most obvious things, which makes sense. So that's why, the real message is getting other people to have a second look over it.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say, especially as well, when it comes to that part of your value proposition, is really looking at testing it all the time. So getting people going to your website, and go, hang on, our conversion rate hasn't changed or it's dropping. What part of our value proposition do we
Even
need to miss out?
100%, but I would say like it might feel daunting to test it all the time. If you're testing it consistently, you're going to be so far ahead of your
Yeah,
competitors. Even if you just test it once, you're going to learn a lot, and
yeah,
you'll very quickly see, oh yeah, okay, this is very valuable. So, but like just encouraging people just to even just get out there and just get some of their associates to look over it. You'll learn very quickly what
yeah.
it's coming across.
Now let's finish up with big number five.
The last one is
Yeah,
my favorite one, and I think it was like the probably the biggest surprise as we kind of went through all the testing over the years. But it's, as I sort of mentioned before, it's around trust.
yeah,
So, what are the trust signals? How can you convince someone to trust you? I mean, it's flabbergasting. Sometimes I've seen horrible sites. You look at them and you're like, this looks terrible, but have really high conversion rates. And it's simply because the user trusts that they're going to get a good result. Like that they trust in the brand, or they trust in the offering. And so it's something that we often spend so much time trying to make it look good. And again, that is important. That is an important factor. But the trust is the most important thing.
yeah.
Is going, why should someone trust what I'm doing? And you just need to get that across. It's a very strong conversion driver.
I think people would understand, obviously, trust is, obviously the reviews we're going through. But some other things that we've really found well with trust is actually that can sometimes be the power of a blog, the power of a YouTube channel,
Yep.
the power of LinkedIn profiles. Because if people go to those, so they see your business is, really active on social media, if they see your business is, if they're definitely it's an information business, they can see that you've got different papers or different followings in different areas. That helps with the trust. So that's one thing, because people think, oh,
Yeah.
trust. I put some reviews up, but sometimes there's those, the
Yeah.
social media
Yep.
trusts make a big difference when it comes to converting.
100%.
Other thing I'd say there is as well is even things around your price guarantees or your money back guarantees. Those things are also a big mover in helping people to trust, because ultimately people don't want to get scammed. But they feel like that
Yeah.
there's a cooling off period or there's a refund period, that it makes it a lot easier to buy.
100%. And it's good to think about that, is like, what else can we do to get across more trust on that? So it's exactly like, is there a guarantee that we can provide? And maybe there's
Yeah.
not, like, maybe you can't give a full guarantee on everything, but it's like, well, what can I guarantee? Any of those sort of things give, as you were sort of just saying, give the user more confidence. So, pushing yourself to get those extra trust signals, they really go a long way.
Yeah. Hey, Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. And just a reminder to everyone, in the show notes, in the description, I'm going to be putting down where you can get in contact with Richard. We'll also put a link into this, the data, that's those 5 points that we spoke about as well. But thank you for joining me, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone on our next episode. See you later.
Thanks, Aaron. A real pleasure.